Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad, where we're going to go through an athlete's calendar, their training calendar, look at what they're doing well and what they aren't doing well, and why they might not be taking their recovery seriously enough. And how that's probably actually keeping their FTP knocked down and kind of stuck too low. In a previous week's episode, we actually had a comment that I thought was fantastic. It says, best episode ever. Funny thing, I was that guy this year. Now I ride half the volume, but all structured, and suddenly I get better. It also aligns with a comment that I saw on Instagram. GCN recently posted something asking everybody, what do you think about AI as your training partner? And of course, we very curiously looked at all the comments. Lots of mentions of TrainerRoad in there, and it was really cool to see how many people were saying that. And one guy said, TrainerRoad just keeps telling me I'm training too, like I'm doing too much. And then another person said, yeah, me too. But funny thing is, I listen to it and I'm faster than I've ever been and I'm training less. So it's pretty great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was good stuff. It was good to see that. I opened it with some trepidation, just to see like what the social narratives would be on the whole thing, and cyclists are digging it. So let's get into it. Greg sent in this question. He said that he needed to take recovery more seriously. He said his family says that he doesn't take it seriously enough either. And he wanted us to go through his account.
So
Greg's yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, does Greg say he has an issue, or does his family just say he needs to take recovery more seriously? Like, is there an issue? Is he too tired? Is he not doing what he wants?
That's actually a good point to bring up, because he has seen, since he started training with TrainerRoad in June of 2024, he's seen a 12% FTP increase. I'd be game for a 12% FTP increase, Nate. I don't know about you. It's pretty darn good. But he said that he doesn't take recovery seriously enough, or he needs to recover better. And then his family says that he doesn't take it seriously enough. So I think he's looking for insight into what am I doing wrong? Everything feels fine. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And that's what we're going to look at here. What he's missing on the recovery side above all. So if that's a problem, I'd say that's where it lies.
Yeah. And he's gone from 3.2 watts per kilo to 3.5 watts per kilo. So that's a significant improvement. You'll feel. So basically what you're looking is to kind of optimize it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And his family's
exactly.
I wonder, with that comment, I wonder if his family's thinking, Greg, your dad or whatever it is, you're tired all the time. You've been in that situation where your whole rest of your life is really hard to do because you've trained so much and you're on the edge.
You can't tell because you think everything's fine. And you're I don't know why everybody says I'm grumpy and I'm tired and I don't know.
I just want to sit in my bed or something like that. It could be really tough.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Greg's a 52-year-old male. And like Nate said, so he came in and he's at 57. A low for weight was 57.5 kilograms. A high for weight is 60.6. He's trended about 1.5 to 2 kilograms higher for average since he started using TrainerRoad. He's also doing strength training. I don't know what that weight gain has been like, but I'm just going to say, Greg, it was all muscle because of your strength training and awesomeness. It's pretty good.
Honestly, if you're going to share his calendar here in a second, I think, Jonathan, but based on, he works out a lot. And I'd be very surprised with this much riding and that much strength training that the weight gain would be anything but, it could be, but I would think muscle for sure.
Yeah, I would think so too. And in this case too, Nate, when we're going through this, I'll probably have you share your screen because mine's so far away from me, it'd be hard for me to kind of see things. And then we can kind of go through that way and we can look at his calendar and then show it to everybody too when we're going through it. His power started at 188 and it's gone up to 212, which is fantastic to see. That's that 12% increase with FTP. So those are all good things. And you might think there's nothing wrong with this 12% FTP increase, but indeed there are actually, after looking at the account, there's some key things that I think that Greg, you're doing wrong right now that you can change. And if you change them, yes, you're going to get faster, but your life also might get a little bit better, more recovered, happier, not feeling as tired all the time. Nate, do you want to share screen on his calendar and then we can just kind of go through things? Cool.
Yeah. So if you look at his calendar, before you start, John, one thing that's cool that people might not understand is last week he went to Durango and skied for 2 days, which is pretty cool. But the skiing actually triggered a red day, 2 rest days. He skied 2 in a row, which is, of course, you're going to go skiing, right? If you're going to ski 2 days in a row. And he skied on 1 red day. The next day was also red. And then there was a day off on yellow. And then on the 4th, he did an easy ride. And he kind of didn't get back to training until the 7th and even skipped some other rides. And he skipped his weekend outside ride. And this is kind of what you would expect for somebody who did train on a red day and then had 2 red days in a row. And again, we've said a lot of times, but it's okay to have a red day and it's okay to even do something on a red day, if it's like, a stage race, a trip vacation like this, an epic ride, you're doing a camp, you're going to take a week off, because of a work trip afterwards or something else. That's all acceptable. So anyway, I thought that was cool that people might not know that even skiing can trigger, TrainerRoad will look at your, all your workouts and then tell you if you're going too hard or need to take rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool to see that he kind of like naturally, or perhaps in this case, Greg, you looked at it and you decided to take that time, but it's cool to see that effect. Works across the board. I did way too much ski touring recently, Nate, in a week. Completely it's like 5.5 hours with my nephew from Alaska who does like 10,000 vert days all the time just for fun, which 10,000 feet of gain when you're ski touring is an insane amount of gain. He completely skied my legs off and cracked me. I did way too much. I got a red day the next day and I got a yellow day the day after. So yeah, it works. And it keeps you honest when your eyes get too big for your stomach. So I think that's really cool that on the right there around that time frame, like he was respecting the yellow and red days. It's really important to do that. And usually the trickier ones to respect are the yellow days. The red days, you often feel like you feel it.
Yeah,
it's hitting you. Like
you
should rest. Yeah. But the yellow ones are the tricky spot where you see a lot of athletes where they can push through a yellow day and convince themselves that everything's okay. Then they'll get to the red day and they'll be like, oof. Or if they start to have a lot of yellow days coming up, they'll start to recognize the fact that like, okay, I need to start to tone things down.
My yellow days are always like, I'm procrastinating my workout and I'm like, I could definitely do it. But then I've done it where we need to do a little notice ahead of time because then I look and I'm like, it's yellow and I go, thank God. I'm like, I'll just, I'll skip it and do it the next day or something like that. And it's nice to see it. So John, I haven't looked at this account at all. So I'm just going to let you tell me and I'm going to live react for everybody on the, you've looked into it on the podcast.
Yeah, let's scroll down to the week of the 6th to the 12th of January. So we're looking at the current week right now as of the time that we're recording this and that you're seeing this. And you might look at this and be like, is he a strength trainer? Like, is he a bodybuilder or is he a cyclist? Because you'll see all the strength training workouts on there. But look closely. These strength workouts are pretty darn short, 6 to 8 minutes, right?
Well, so he has 3 strength, just for people who are listening. He has 3 strength workouts, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
He actually has 4. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday is his typical schedule.
Yes, yes, you're correct. And Monday he skipped it because of that ski week, probably the week before.
Yeah, that's right.
This is what's planned.
Yep, chest, abs. Greg, you probably look jacked. That's pretty sweet. So.
Yeah, he's got legs covered.
Yeah, exactly. So in addition to this, when you look at his training plan and you actually kind of go through that perspective, and maybe that's actually maybe a good spot to start. So he recently trained for like Tour de Tucson. And if anybody knows about that race, it's not like one where you can go ahead and click on that training plan annotation, Nate, and then we can look through at his plan. That's not exactly like something that's going to, and go ahead and click edit plan. That one's not going to be, it's not some crazy punchy race. It's predominantly like flat. And in this case, going through that one, I want to go over like some changes to his plan that he could have and what he actually does have. So right now we look at his training plan and look at what he has. And he has, on Mondays, he has it off. On Tuesdays, he has an hour-long interval workout. On Wednesdays, he has an easy 30-minute ride, which he has marked as outside. And then on Thursdays, marked as an hour 15 hard interval workout. And then he has endurance on Saturdays. So Fridays off, then Saturdays, it's 90 minutes endurance. And then on Sundays, it's an hour of hard, but then he's marked it as a group ride. So he typically does the group ride on Sundays.
So what I see here, John, is that he is replacing the weekend hard ride with usually intervals are inside with a hard group ride outside. And he switched it. Usually we have Saturday is the hard day and Sunday is the endurance day, but probably it's that group ride is Sundays and they would switch it for him. So the Saturday is the endurance and then into Sunday. So that's one thing is you'd have to watch that. Actually, it's indoors, right? So you're probably going to be able to watch that endurance ride to make sure. I'd really want to make sure then sorry, John, that you would eat enough after that Saturday ride to prep for that Sunday ride. That could be another spot where you could get in trouble.
You'll see that sometimes those endurance rides are done outside, and not uncommonly, actually. They're done outside, and they get pretty tough. And while you don't have a power meter when you're training outside here, we can look at some markers to kind of try to figure that out. So we can go into his calendar here. And if you look at like what goes on these Saturdays, and you can click on let's click on a VO2 workout that he's done recently. So we can kind of get a fix for where the heart rate is at when something is harder. Let's see, there's a Silver Lake, a threshold workout that could be good. Right there. Yeah. On Thursday. So this is a threshold over under workout, and we're looking at the heart rate that he has toward the end of those sets, because they're not particularly long interval, like not long sets that we're working with here. It's around 150 to 155 beats per minute, right? Now click on any of these Saturdays that you see where they're the endurance rides. So click on that one. And then if we look at like what the heart rate is,
wow.
the heart rate is often 150 up to 160. We're looking at a specific example where it looks like there's even some heart rate dropouts, but I looked at a lot of these rides and it was more common to see your heart rate between 155 and 160 than it is during your threshold workouts.
Yeah, it says here down here, max heart rate is 162 also. So this wasn't the easy endurance ride. This was good.
It's hard.
But too, I don't know if we mentioned this, but this athlete doesn't have power outside. So that's why we're looking at heart rate, is we can't, with power, we'd be able to know how much time in zone like we did last time and see it. But you can do this with heart rate if you don't have it. Look at something you did inside. Maybe you can do a little more heart rate outside. That can happen, especially with cooling with a fan. If it's not the same, I would look really into cooling to make sure that you can't push yourself hard enough. But this is a good way to approximate. Like I'm pretty confident this person isn't keeping this in endurance.
That's right. And looking at like a lot of the different rides and looking at average speed, assuming that these are Zia Velo, I think is like a club there in New Mexico where this athlete's from. And I assume that you're riding with other people, but even then, if you look at like the pace, it's a pretty speedy pace a lot of the time for your average speed on those weekends, on those Saturday rides. So, it's those, if we think back to that training plan and you have these anaerobic rides on Sunday that are going to be physically very difficult, your training plan is telling you that if you do that endurance workout as prescribed, going easy on Saturdays, then it should make it possible so that on Sundays you can still do the anaerobic workout. But an interesting thing, sometimes you'll see on your training plan, depends on who you are as an athlete. It's a really smart setup. When you use the plan builder, it goes through. And if let's say you swap Saturday and Sunday, so that instead of your Sundays being your easy endurance ride, it's now the hard ride, and Saturdays are the easy day. Sometimes it will tell you that that's not recommended because that's pushing you over your limits, because you'll have enough fatigue by the end of that endurance ride that going into a hard anaerobic day the next day would be too tough. So it's really, the order matters here. When you do a hard workout, it takes time to recover. Even if we don't think it's a hard workout and we think it's just a group ride, we have to be objective and look at what we actually did during it, because it's probably taking more of a toll than you think if it's not actually structured and measured and you can control the pace.
So what I see here on this Saturday, Sunday, first, his abs have 12 sets. How do you do 12 sets of abs? Like
that's a lot.
Yeah. That's so many. That's not like 12 reps. That's 12 sets. And
who knows
all
how
the
many
time.
reps.
Yeah. So that's 12 sets of abs. Even with that, that's not going to be too much strain on your body. It's just not that much. So they did the Saturday, air quotes, easy ride. And then on Sunday, this isn't what was in the plan. This person picked this themselves, but they did an anaerobic ride, 30 minutes to start at like noon. And then it
looks like it's a warm up for a race that they did thereafter.
Exactly. Yep. So it's a 30-minute. Yeah, that's a good point, John. 30-minute anaerobic ride at noon with just like kind of 2 spikes. It was one of the easiest anaerobic rides we have. Actually, it might just be that could just be an opener, actually.
That's it. It's just like openers, warm up.
It is one of our opener workouts. And then they did a Zwift race at 12:30 and very hard, 45 minutes. I mean, this looks really hard, right?
And, yeah.
To be expected. And I think that's what they did to replace the group ride, the hard ride. And I think that's good. You harp on this so much. It's not structured, so you're not having as much fitness benefit from it. But if this is the way you want to do stuff and you're really having fun on these Zwift races, you can go do that. And then he got some power PRs too during that race. They did have power because it's inside. And let's
analyze this ride and kind of take a look at it. It'd be cool to look at the zone too, that this athlete's getting. like the time and zone, forgive me, since we do have power from these ones.
Yeah,
Can you click open details, Nate?
Yeah, I want to just show this other part first. Okay, so if we look at this athlete's Zwift race, it wasn't it's 46 minutes total, but the actual race part of it was only about 35 minutes. So the 35 minutes, they did a normalized power of 226 with an FTP of 211.
Out.
Yeah,
Holy
so
cow.
It's close to a 1.1, like IF kind of thing.
That's hard.
It is 1.08 during that time. So definitely hard. Max heart rate, and we talked about 155. They went to 173. Average heart rate 157.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, and it looked like this is a 1, 2, 3, like a 4. It's 4 times up a hill.
It's also worth stating that like when you're dealing with a race that's this short, you're probably going to see a lower average heart rate just because of how long it will take your heart to get to the point where it's, where it's revved up and staying up as well. Like, you know what I mean? They like, if you do like a short effort,
they revved up in 2 minutes.
High.
Like it all depends how you start, John.
Yeah. They do start hard. That's for sure.
Yeah. Did you want to look at the power zones at all?
I do, yeah. So, intentionally, these would be something somewhere around like an anaerobic sort of ride. And looking at this, we see 23.5%. So you're looking at the whole ride now. And if we look at the race.
So that's pretty cool. What we can do too is, for those who are listening to the podcast, it's that classic file where you say like 75% of it is like hard, and then you kind of have really low after that. And when you look at the power zones, our software, if you can select you can click and drag and select the race portion of it, the power zones will update. So you're only looking at the data for that section.
It's pretty cool. And we can see that almost 24% of their time was in anaerobic, 15% was in VO2 max, 16% was in threshold. So right there, we've got well over half of their time was spent threshold and above, which is good. And the majority of that was spent in anaerobic. So like kudos in the sense that we're putting more into that bucket. In terms of it being structured, it's not. But if there's one spot like with the anaerobic work in particular, that where I feel like group rides can kind of pair well. Like I don't think group rides pair well with threshold work, for example, unless you somehow are doing like a rolling pace line of like, over unders, right? Where you're like a triple T, like a team time trial. But for this case, in terms of the anaerobic stuff, you're getting those hard repeats and you're having to repeat them amidst the chaos. It's not the worst thing. Is it that you can't expect the same outcome that you would get from the workout, but it's not the worst thing.
But it's a race. Like, you know what I mean? I think we should compare the same. You know, it's kind of funny right here on this is a hill. This is where let us know if you're true, but I think this is a break. The breakaway, because if you look at it up here, it's easier. I see a spike. They could be covering somebody that create the break. They go through, try to cover somebody else. And then here where it's kind of normalized again, you got caught. Yeah, that's what I think.
Exploded.
Yeah. And then the whole group kind of kicked up again on this hill. But just because this section looks different. Actually, no, this section looks pretty similar. They might have tried it twice. But the first 2 hill climbs did not have that. And this one has
different than the first 2 laps.
The other part of it is the second time they did it. You see how the peaks are so much less?
Yeah.
If we just look at the peak power there, like the max is 480, average, let's see the normalized 279. I didn't really select that really well. Let me just get it better. Average 298, max 480, 291 normalized power. If you look at this break, I think we do all 3.
Wow.
Normalized 265. Yeah, max 400, average 275. It could have been an easier break, but let's see, you go heart rate 169.
Chances are
heart 168. Yeah, and that just shows you how I'm really glad we're looking at actual race, how important repeatability is. I think they stayed with the group just because they're power file, I'm guessing, the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And then they really kicked it up at this last hill. They hit their max power of 455 and they pushed over the top. But repeatability in races, and if you don't drop off, if you had those days, John, where like it takes a long time to drop off, or the whole beginning of the race, your fitness with a higher FTP, instead of being threshold, it might be sweet spot. And then that allows you to have those peaks and
you can just absorb it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's where too, in our plans and just in general, some of the specialty stuff and anaerobic and VO2 max, where there's lots of repeats. It'll start out with less and then sometimes the power doesn't even change. You just do a longer workout with more repeats, or you have less rest in between,
Yeah.
which allows you to have a higher repeatability. So it's not always about your max power or your power PRs for a certain time. It's how many times can you go hard. And this is a good example of this person was tired, and you can see just the 2 attacks being less. I might be reading this completely wrong, but I don't think I am.
I thought of a really cool metaphor for this the other day, Nate, for explaining why like a high threshold makes all these things easier. Since we're talking about these attacks, if you've ever gone skiing and you ski at a place when there's like hardly any snow, and then you go when they have a ton of snow and you're like, where are all the rocks? Like the trees are small, the rocks are gone, and you have all this snowpack as a cushion in between you and whatever lies beneath. The pokey anaerobic efforts that are happening in a race, if you have more snowpack, you're sitting up higher, they simply hurt you less. Like, and that's like such a huge thing to keep in mind. When you're talking about repeatability, it's a skill to build, but you have to have a high threshold too. Otherwise, they're just too high.
John, that's like the least relatable example.
Sorry.
So when you get on your yacht and it's like really big, but the bigger yacht you have, the less waves, like you feel the waves.
Not and then it feels no.
You just grew up in a ski town, so that's but the amount of people I don't even know. I grew up in a ski town. I didn't get that one. So, but no, I get the idea.
Well, anyways,
yeah, more
skiers drop into the comments and protect me from here from this one, from being called a yacht person. So, so this is when I'm looking at the time and zone. This isn't the worst thing. This is pretty darn good. Like, like you said, it's a race, so we're not really going out with any sort of objective to do it. But it's always good to look in post because I've seen many examples, and everyone listening to this, go look at your calendars now. If you're substituting like a workout for a group ride or a race, and maybe that day was supposed to be a day when you were supposed to be doing threshold work, go look at that and just see like where your time is spent. Because if your time is not spent even remotely close to that threshold time, then you probably want to look at rearranging your training plan a little bit so that maybe on those group ride days, you do move something that is more similar to what you'll actually be doing on the group ride.
John, as you're doing your ski analogy, as my brain, just kidding. But I looked at this. The other interesting thing on here is if you look this athlete, so look at their cadence. So as they come in, they're like at 100. Let's see this easier section, they're in like the 90s. And then when they really hit the power, their cadence drops into, 77, 76.
Well, this is interesting because you're pointing out the cadence differences, and chances are it's like, it looks steep right there, right? We can see like the grade of what they're going up. It's pointing up.
It's only 4% here, 5. Like when they really did the break. Yeah.
Steep.
And this is 5,
This is 6. A great example of elevation charts are always, if you don't look over at the left and see the changes, right? But when that changes, in Zwift, when you're racing around, you're in erg mode. It's weird though, because it's not erg mode holding you to your intervals. You're in erg mode matching to the terrain. So you still shift the gears, right? So that's why if you go up a climb, you might drop down to your little ring still. But that's really low cadence for those harder efforts. Like you're pointing out, Nate, like, that when you're doing high power for this athlete, that's really high power, and you're doing it at a really low cadence, that can be pretty tough. Oh, but look at this.
What I did is I jumped back to see some other rides, and when they're riding easy, their cadence is like 90, 100. And here on this sweet spot ride, this athlete puts their cadence down to 50, 55.
Oh, all right, let's click a different one. Maybe they're just doing low cadence that day.
Yeah, so this is like 90. This is what I was looking for, is what on a regular day, we're looking at over-unders for threshold, and they're right around 95, 96. Let's do, I bet they're going to drop it on this anaerobic. Oh no, they're 117.
Way high.
Yeah. This anaerobic on these intervals, 116.
Oh, that's interesting, Nate. Good find on the cadence. I didn't notice that.
So what I would say, I think this athlete is dropping their gears too low on this.
Yeah.
And I think when you go that, especially if your natural cadence is more, in the 90s and stuff, and I think anywhere from 80 to 100 is like fair. I know there's been so much debate on that, whatever kind of feels good in here. But if you're dropping down to the 70s, and especially if your regular is like 95, I think
considering it's not like 10% or something too.
You have gears to go, right? So,
yeah.
I think I think what it's going to
race how you train.
Well, right? I think what it's going to do is it's going to tire your legs out prematurely on these, and you're not going to get those bigger spikes and stuff. And when you really drop down low, and the slower your cadence is, the more it gets into like a strength workout. If you can think of like 1 RPM, that would be a really To get the same power, it would be a huge amount of strength to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
good find.
I think they're probably dropping a little bit too more. I'd like to see what would happen if they didn't. Maybe they're dropping 2 gears when they could only drop 1. Or the other one too is, going into it, this person's at 100, and this is a good tip anyways in racing. Before you do this break, and maybe this person got caught out. We don't know if they're a breakaway or got caught out.
Right.
But you need to shift early. When you're outside for sure, because you don't want everyone to hear that, but you want room so that when you start to accelerate, you don't have to shift 4 times. You've ever done that where you have to shift so many times to speed up and then things jump? It's not a good case. You want to come in maybe if you are going to have a little bit of a slower cadence, you want to come in with a little bit slower cadence too, at the lower power.
Yeah,
so that you're ready.
This is it's interesting, I guess, breakdown of the race. It makes me think, Nate, it could be fun to break down other people's races too. If you have a race file and you want us to break it down and see what happened in your race, you just don't know what happened and you want some insight into it, let us know in the YouTube comments below. It'd be good to
especially the video. That'd be cool to break down a Zwift video race.
Yeah, absolutely. This now, taking a step back and looking at their calendar here, we have this really hard Zwift race, but that was preceded, and it is preceded many times by this group ride that you do, which recently you've been doing them inside. Great job on doing those inside, doing them structured, keeping it clean. But if you do those Saturday group rides beforehand, that heart rate is roughly somewhere between, it's around threshold, like what you have for threshold workouts for the average heart rate for the workout. So what you're stacking here is you're doing on Saturdays and Sundays, you're doing something hard. And you can see on Sunday the 8th, what we're looking at now, you went yellow because that was a harder endurance. It wasn't just like the easy ride that it was supposed to be and that you've associated with. Instead, it was pretty darn hard. So you did this threshold style effort straight into a hard anaerobic race. And that's why it gets to the point where it starts to get too difficult over time to be able to continue to keep getting faster.
And then so too,
be careful about stacking. That's the principle here. Stacking hard days and easy days is a red flag, or I should say hard days to hard days is a red flag. You want to offset a hard day with an easy day, whether it's before, after, or a day off around it. That's what you want to have. Most typically in training, that's going to get you to the point where you can have a more sustainable increase.
They have an annotation on their calendar, which is it's just like an annotation. It's like a note that you can do, and you can make them. It looks like on Google Calendar, those all day meetings. So what I see here is on the interesting is on the 5th. They have a blood donation scheduled, and then they have a blood donation 3 days before that, and then they have.
Tip, Nate, before you get into this, more people should do that. By the way, is put down these. Because I look back at my calendar and there are many times where I'm like, why did that happen? And because I didn't take the time to put down an annotation, I don't know. And I think that I'll remember it in the future, but I don't. I lose context and I forget about it. It's super important to put those things down that could affect your training.
We should probably just on the podcast too call it a note. It's down here on the bottom because that's what internally we call an annotation, but for externally, it just called it a little note. And you can also put in time off, injury or illness. Those are types of notes. And they put this as an illness note. So they put down for every week, for 4 weeks, they repeated this note, and it says, for 1 week, it says 92% post-blood donation. Then it says 94% post-blood donation the next week, 96%, 98%, and then it goes away. John, this has to probably be related to how their red blood cell count comes back. That's what they're thinking?
I'm thinking so. So there's this, there's a study called iron supplementation. Oh, forgive me. That's probably the wrong one to look at first. The effect of a standard whole body donation on oxygen uptake and exercise capacity, a systematic review and meta-analysis. This is from Hans van Remortel and colleagues. And this is from 2016. So published in a journal in 2017. Basically what this one looks at, it says, for the results in a systematic review and a meta-analysis to take a bunch of studies. They set a criteria for them to pass all those studies through. So then they get the studies that are, quote, high quality or of sufficient quality to be included. So they said we identified 6,237 references and finally included 18 before-after studies of low quality. Or 18 before and after. Then they said 24 to 48 hours after a blood donation. Here's what they learned from all these studies. 24 to 48 hours after a blood donation, hemoglobin concentration was reduced by 7% until 14 days after the donation. And they say maximal oxygen uptake was lower by 7%. So VO2 max was hindered by 7%. That's big. That's a profound amount. And a reduction in maximal exercise capacity. So a 10% decrease in when they were tested. The reason it says maximal exercise capacity is because they tested in a bunch of different methods, whether it was treadmill or bike or something else. But an average of a 10% decrease was present. So for 14 days after blood donation, this was the average. When I looked through at a handful of other studies, I didn't thoroughly look at all of the studies included, but some of them had prospective impacts all the way out to like over a month. Some of them had them closer to 2 weeks. So this is, I assume what they're looking at, maybe they're assuming they're the blood oxygen rate or just like the recovery rate from this. Who knows what they're indicating there. But the point is, it does have a profound impact. And 7% decrease in VO2 max, 10% decrease in effectively like your performance on the bike. That's profound. Imagine turning your workout down by 10%, right? Like that's like, it's a totally different workout in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I Googled this too, and I don't know a lot about this, but what Google tells me is that it takes about 4 weeks for the red blood cell count to get back. And if you remember back in the day with Lance and everyone, what they had are blood bags with their blood to get more red blood cells into their body. And that was like the premium way for them to dope and would be safe for the queen stage.
Juice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're doing the opposite is you're taking it and giving it to somebody else. So on those, that's just going to basically, and this athlete did a good job of doing that. That's going to impact, at least noting it down, that's going to impact your performance. Also, before we talked about their Saturday or their Sunday being group rides outside, it looks like there's Zwift races that are group rides, which is totally acceptable. And looks like that's kind of the building their week for that. I'm sure that Sunday ride, the Saturday ride, that's endurance that you kind of repeat. You want to do that outside. And I'm guessing that might be with people too. Based on the intensity of it.
With that group ride, it's got to be a group ride. I mean, it's part of a crew and part of like a club. So I would assume so. Mm-hmm. Giving blood is an ethical thing. Like I'm not going to tell somebody that they should or should not give blood.
Great. Good job.
It's a thing that helps people out beyond yourself, which I know that we're talking about training and becoming faster on a bike. So that's not exactly, something that's going to be quite as noble as giving blood, but it is really important that you have that in mind, that there will be an impact. For a person like me, anytime I've given blood, I've had issues with fainting. I've had like pretty severe issues from it, and I don't give blood as a result of that. But it's something that if you are giving blood and you're wondering why your training is affected, well, there's science to back up that after 14 days, it's decreased still by a significant amount. It's probably more after, within 7 days, and it's probably less, but still present as you go through a month, at least according to the data that exists.
The next day is coming after that too. Like, Greg, I think maybe your family is saying this because it looks like you're addicted to fitness, because even after giving blood and doing that race, I see 2 workouts that say Hotel Peloton. And I'm guessing you were on a trip and you're like, I got to get in these two workouts. I am just guessing, but
says the guy who on previous podcasts, I remember you bringing your rollers.
Whole bike.
And
a trainer to Disney World.
Bring wrenches and pedal wrenches to swap out Disney for power World, meter pedals.
To do it in the hotel. It's my
good times.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I can see why your family might say that, right? Mm-hmm. Can I actually share another cool study on this on blood side of things? This one is from, it says iron supplementation limits the deleterious effects of repeated blood donation on endurance sports performance, but not on iron status. So this is really interesting because I've seen different studies on this. So this is from Barbara Pachakian. Forgive me, Barbara. I probably butchered your name there. But effectively, it says that negative effects of repeated blood donation were found for markers of iron storage, markers of functional iron, and or iron metabolism regulation, and physiological markers. Iron supplementation did not affect iron storage, but did limit at the high dose of 80 milligrams, which is actually a pretty significant amount, the effect of blood donations on functional iron and or iron metabolism regulation, and at both 20 and 80 milligrams, the negative effects on maximal power output and peak oxygen consumption. So if you are going to be giving blood and doing that, there is, and I'll link to this study down below, but there is evidence to suggest that if you are supplementing with iron, you may not see big changes in the iron levels and the markers that you have, but at least there's evidence from this study that they have here, which is with 44 subjects, by the way, and pretty well-controlled study, that it can actually reduce that negative impact on your performance on the bike. So it's probably something you want to look into if you routinely give blood or you're just doing so occasionally. Okay. Looking at the rest of the account, some things. Nate, I'm looking at all that strength training. I don't want to see all that strength training put on the easy days and the days off. Even though it's short, we're dealing with a 52-year-old athlete. I'd recommend probably putting those, when you can, putting them on the days where you're doing harder stuff to allow yourself to actually recover. This is really hard psychologically sometimes too, though, because you like to do the workout every day and that feels really good, to just do something every day. But that would be my recommendation if you're trying to get faster and take recovery more seriously, is to give yourself a recovery day. Because as of now, there's no recovery day.
Also,
7 days a week.
Combine the abs with your chest. They don't need to be 2 different days, and that reduces the day right there. 12 sets of abs. You're probably doing some kind of body weight stuff, and maybe that's what you need to do. But if you can do some like hangs and you put a little bit of weight on your feet, where you raise your feet up instead of just your knees, you raise your feet up. That's probably enough to get that going. I think this is probably a lot of not effective abs in order to do 12. Like you don't. When I do it, I've been switching to actually a full upper body workout where I only do 1 set per exercise.
Whoa.
Yeah. So then you hit it more.
Is it just
times.
Like a gnarly set, or like?
I like 10, but yeah, you go as hard as you can after warm up, and the idea, we talked about this before, but the idea is you hit your muscles more often during the week, and thus you work out, you damage your muscles, and then you get your muscles build up, and then they decay after that, or they fatigue, or not fatigue. What's the right word? Get smaller.
Atrophy.
Atrophy. Yep. And if you're doing chest once a week, there's a lot of time in there for it to atrophy. Mm-hmm. But if you do it 3 times per week, because you're hitting it, you have more times for it to, I can't think of the other word too, to get bigger, but
hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy. Yes.
Yeah. Swole. Yes.
Oh, that's what I was looking for. But so on this one, abs, when I do it, and I'll do like a weighted set, I'll just do 1, and it works pretty well. Or I think 2 weighted sets. 1 weighted set is going to be plenty for abs. You could do like upper chest. Kind of weird just to do chest 2 for 8 sets. I don't know what it says beginner chest if you're what you're doing here, but I would do upper body with the abs just twice a week, and that's probably enough. And yeah, you could do them on the. I'm trying to think if then they would have an extra day off. Yeah. Because if they had Fridays off and Mondays off, that could probably be okay, especially if they put the chest on like Thursdays here and they had this day. So I'll just edit this. Whoops. Only this activity. I don't want to mess up their calendar too much. But if they put their strength training there, let's say abs were there, only this activity. I'm sorry I'm messing with your calendar. And then this abs goes back here. So I'm just redoing this person's calendar for them. That's what we should be doing. So now look at the calendar here. They have this strength, which is going to be after this like hard group ride. You probably don't want this, actually. You probably want it like this.
I'd move that to the 7th.
Yeah.
Yep. So now we have Mondays off. Instead of Mondays doing strength training, we have Mondays off, and then you have a sweet spot day as well on Monday. And then on Mondays off. On Tuesday, you have a sweet spot in your strength training, and you're stacking abs and chest, which is fine to stack those too, especially when we look at it. You typically do a 6-minute chest routine and an 8-minute ab routine. So this isn't like, you're doing a whole lot.
And yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. So the duration might be the bigger part of this. And also they're doing it at 6 a.m. And this ride that they're doing, if this is the same, is at 3 p.m. So you got enough time to like recover from it, and just upper body. So they're getting up and they're doing a short, this would be 15-minute strength workout on Tuesday.
And then on Wednesday, we have just an easy ride, which you have marked as an outside ride that you would do. So So the key about that is going to be keeping those easy. What that means is look at what your heart rate is when you're riding. When your heart rate's around 130 to 140 when you're doing something or even 120 to 140 when you're doing an endurance ride, that's what you want to see at the end. And throughout. That's where you want to see that heart rate, since you don't have power outside. If you have power outside, stick to your zones. But if you don't, stick to that.
What John was doing there is looking at an endurance ride on indoor, seeing that heart rate, and then just using that as the marker for the outside heart rate.
That's right. And then we go into Thursday, and Thursday is a day where we have a threshold day, and then we have strength, and we're stacking that strength again with chest and abs. Now, the cool part is now you've had an easy day in between those two harder days. But you've also had, prior to that, you had Monday off, so you're going to feel more recovered and be able to handle that. And then now you have Fridays off too. So this is going to make it so that you can absorb all that stress and adapt to what you've been doing on Tuesday through Thursday much better by alternating easy, hard, and giving yourself full rest.
Yeah, basically that easy day too, you basically have 3 days off, because the easy ride is really easy, but you get to be outside and do your thing. But that's a lot better than what we saw before.
That's right. And now, since you probably have a hard time switching around the group ride that you want on Sunday, everyone can't bend to your training plan.
Well, it's a Zwift race, right? So they probably could.
Yeah. So if you're doing a Zwift
I think
race,
it's a Saturday ride. That's probably the one they won't change.
I would totally swap everything over if you're going to be doing, if you can change it. If you can, it's almost always a better principle to end the week with endurance rather than ending the week with a really hard workout. And the reason for that is because you will have accumulated more fatigue, especially if you're training the day before. So you want to leave yourself fresh to hit harder to reach targets. If it's easier to reach targets like endurance, you don't have to worry as much about that freshness.
I think that's the principle in general, is that with what we just changed, that Friday has a rest day. So the day before your race, you have rest, you have the opener, and it's only a 45-minute race. I don't think you need an opener the day before that too. And then your endurance ride. The end of the week does matter, but it really, just in general, have a day off before your hard day and then go endurance after that.
Yeah. And then I think that with that, I think that we're in a good spot, like with a training plan. I know that you're prepping for Tour de Scottsdale, which is pretty cool. The one thing I would say is with your training plan, if you're going through there, this is a mistake that I see people commonly make, is they just think that it's a road race, so I'll make it rolling road race. But if you're racing for the front and it is indeed on rolling terrain, that sort of thing, I would go for that. But for most athletes, I think we're probably just going out there and we're going for a completion. We're shooting for some sort of a goal time. We're not trying to mix it up and attack and counterattack at the front. And if that's the case, if you're not trying to mix it up and counterattack at the front, then I would recommend in most cases going for a rolling road race, unless it does have truly long sustained climbs. Going for Grand Fondo, unless it has those truly long sustained climbs, because that's going to build up a bit more sustainable power for you in this case, Greg, instead of just focusing on the anaerobic repeats. But right now, I think that you're in a good spot with what you have. And those changes that Nate did on that week that you can see on the calendar, I think are really kind of use that as a template. Go back in when you edit your plan, you can change all these things up. So then it just lays it out for you in this way. And I think it'll work much better. You'll get faster.
I promise I'll put your calendar back. I think if we open this drop down here, you can see the TSS over time. And if you look here about the future plan, which is what we planned, you have some recovery weeks that are short. And if you look back at your history, you have maybe this one that's a little bit less, but you're not really taking those recovery weeks. And I think that fatigue builds up over time. And if we go really far back, I think here probably your FTP is wrong, and that's why the TSS is so high. But in general, you can see that maybe here's one recovery week. Then you just
this was prior to using TrainerRoad. For those that can't see, this is prior to using TrainerRoad, and this is just riding, doing Zwift stuff.
They basically just ride a ton. It's always up. There's a little mark here, but after this, it's kind of just always up the whole time. A little difference. That probably got tired a bunch and then up a bunch. But pretty much too much on for what we'd want to see to really get faster.
That's right. So recapping, some things that we're seeing here is make sure that you're giving yourself days off in the week. Don't just go 6 days a week or 7 days a week on something. And stack your strength training with your harder days. Remember, you're not like Ronnie Coleman out here, trying to get huge and do something like that. Instead, you're probably just trying to get strong and capable, and it's something that you can do. Just stack it with your hard workouts. It's going to be better, and it's going to give you the time off that you need. The other thing is, don't get things backwards with doing your endurance rides before your hard rides unless it's absolutely like you can't avoid it. So if you have Saturday, Sunday, the reason that it typically has Saturday being hard and then Sunday being easy is because we're assuming that you will have more fatigue by the end of the week. So you want to make sure that don't switch those if you don't have to. And then your outside rides, even though you mark them as endurance, like match them to a ride that you had scheduled as endurance, be objective. Make sure that you're looking at some sort of data to understand how hard you're actually going, because then you're turning that easy ride into a threshold ride, into an anaerobic ride, and accumulating a ton of fatigue. And then finally, take some iron when you donate blood. I feel like those are the main things, Nate. I'm not sure if I missed anything.
I bet you they did, since they even wrote down 96%.
Yes.
Like they did some research. Greg did. And the last thing is, if you do move that week around with those early strength training workouts, maybe you could sleep in more. I know some people, especially older people, just wake up, but getting that extra, if you don't have to like do the whole, maybe like 30 minutes, I would think, even if you did a 15-minute strength workout, there's like stuff time before and after that you're,
that's right,
setting up or getting to wherever the gym part is in your house and stuff. You could probably get some extra sleep, especially after those hard days, could really help with recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. That was a great one to review. Nate, really quick update on Peaks Challenge for me in Australia. I signed up for it, put like out the word is spreading fast. People are stoked. I'm going to be going, and I should explain what Peaks Challenge is. Peaks Challenge it's a big, long, really hard 165 mile, I think 16,500 feet of climbing or something like that, road race in Australia, in Falls Creek in Victoria, in the Australian Alps. And I signed up for it. I'm stoked to do it. I've been sick for a week and a half. That's why we didn't have a podcast last week. We're testing something new, Nate, at TrainerRoad that we can't talk about yet, but we will talk about at some point. But what I can say is that coming back after being sick and just having it pick the workouts for me, and it was perfect. It was amazing. I was really worried that like coming back from this, I'd be like, oh, it's going to be really tough. And no, like I'm feeling good. So I'm still on a good track. I have not weighed myself. I followed your advice. So instead of weighing myself, I'm just trying to stick to adequately fueling. Creatine, I finished the loading cycle. So now I'm just doing 5 grams of creatine per day. And that's what I'm doing. I think that's the maintenance phase, right, Nate? That people typically follow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So doing that and then making sure my protein's high, but training's actually going really well and I'm super consistent. If you want to follow along, you can go to my Strava, check it out there. You'll see all the workouts that I'm doing all the time. The goal is to finish the whole thing in 7 hours and 45 minutes. I do have one request though. I am going to get to Melbourne on March 4th. And then I will be there. I'm going up to Falls Creek on the 7th of March. If you want to ride on the 5th or the 6th in Melbourne.
Free podcast.
I would love
the whole time.
Nate's being sarcastic. If you want to ride, I promise I'm not pre-race Jonathan in this context. I'll be happy and I won't be a pain to be around.
So I mean, you'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. So March 5th and 6th in Melbourne. If you want to ride, if you're a club or you're some sort of cycling group and you guys want to get together and do a ride, anything like that, let me know. I don't really know where to ride. It looks like everyone rides something called Beach Road really commonly. They're in Melbourne, or Yarra Avenue, I think is another thing, but I don't know where to ride. I don't know what to do. Help me out. If you guys want to do a group ride, let me know. That'd be really fun. Put that out, maybe get some podcast listeners and TrainerRoad athletes together too. It could be really fun. So drop down in the comments if you're an Aussie in that region and would want to do that, or if you're doing Peaks Challenge, give me your tips. That day is really scary, so it's gonna be crazy. I looked at the weather. You remember, Nate, last time I always said it was hot, and that was like the big thing. I looked at previous ones and it snowed. Oh. So like, I have no clue what it'll be. So, anyways, it's gonna be interesting. With all that, everybody, if you're listening to this and you haven't signed up for TrainerRoad, it's the knowledge, attentiveness, flexibility of a world-class coach at a fraction of the cost. It's amazing. Go sign up for it. It will make you faster. You get a training calendar like we just looked at. It will build a training plan that's 100% from the ground up designed for you. It analyzes you. It builds everything out. And then you can just follow that training plan. You can follow it and train however you want. It'll make you faster. It'll even keep an eye out for fatigue when it's creeping up on you and adjust your plan for you. It's awesome. Go try it. We'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.